to another episode of Unbreakable Confidence. It's your host, Ryan Romano, and I have today a very special guest, Samantha Peszek, who is an Olympic silver medalist and founder of Beam Queen Boot Camp, which she owns, operates, and runs now. And I'm super pumped to have you on because I think that you bring a new level of insight, like for our audience, in terms of all different perspectives, obviously from an athlete to career and doing your own thing. And I think you're doing even like some broadcasting and stuff now. So I'm super pumped, and thanks for joining on with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be on, and hopefully a little bit of what I learned can help someone that's listening to this right now.
That's it. It only takes one piece of wisdom. All right. So first question for everybody. I firmly believe that everybody is a high achiever, a high performer in their own way, whatever they define success as, whatever they define performance as. So what, you being a high achiever, high performer, what is it that you feel like, what are those one or two things that you would think that makes you unique, or as I always call them, our superpowers? What are your superpowers that have helped you stand out either in athletics or in career now?
Gosh, it's such a tough question, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is mental toughness. I had a lot of fears as a young gymnast, and it was debilitating for me when I was just 6-7 years old. And so the fact that I had to overcome that mental struggle at such a young age, I think built such a strong foundation that has now translated and transferred to my life as a business person. I was never the most talented athlete, but I was always the hardest gymnast in the room. And I was known for being that like icy competitor. So I think my mind really was the thing that has carried me to have success in life, just as a gymnast and then outside of gymnastics as well.
So how do you feel like how, is that something you developed, or is it something you felt like it was kind of a little more natural to you? Like, how is it that how did you notice it at first, right? Like to notice like, hey, this is what's going to separate me. This is what's going to make me stand out in accomplishing the things that I want to accomplish. Or was it more of like a developmental thing down there as time went on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for me, I was kind of forced to deal with it head on because I had such bad fears. I mean, my teammates and best friends were a level ahead of me because I couldn't get myself to do a round of back handspring, which is one of the most elementary skills in gymnastics. And so I think because my mind was very much my nemesis at a young age, if I wanted to progress in a sport, and at that time, it was really just if I wanted to continue to hang out with my friends, I had to figure out, why my mind was not letting me do the skill, why I was afraid, what was going to help me get over it. So really like at a young age, understanding my own mind. So developing that level of self-awareness and being able to ask for help, I think was actually turned into my strength. So I always tell, whether it's gymnasts or anybody really, if you have such a fear, it actually can turn into one of your biggest strengths if you allow it.
Man, you said something super powerful that I think a lot of people will pass it over. And I want to follow up with it is you mentioned like asking for help. And I think that's like one of the underlining things that so many kids today, really even adults, honestly, like struggle with in terms of like, they feel like they got to have all the answers. And if they don't know, it's like, that's why I think a lot of people like dabble in so many things instead of just like taking things head on and finding people that are playing the game better than you, doing business better than you, and don't reinvent the wheel, right? Just ask what it is that allowed them to be successful. So was that something that you did early on, and who were those people that you reached out to? And I'm assuming it's the same thing in business, right? Like is like, I've been where you are too, in terms of like, oh shit, what's going on here? And trying to figure those things out. So who are people that you reached out to in terms of really upgrading that in athletics and career?
Well, I think the first thing was really admitting to myself that I was struggling. And I think that, we talk about self-awareness, that level of like, man, realizing that I'm stuck, right? I'm in this place and I'm really struggling, and it's not something that I can fix on my own. So really admitting to yourself is step one. And then talking to my parents and my coaches, because they're frustrated because you're frustrated. But if you don't speak up, maybe it seems like they're mad at you, but really they're just frustrated because they want to help. And so I think understanding when I finally, had that conversation with my coaches and my parents of, I'm afraid. I don't know why I'm afraid. I don't want to be afraid. Will you help me? And then, working with me of, okay, let's do this. Let's try this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's go back to this. This works. Let's keep doing that, And so figuring out what works for you. And I think that's like a good lesson in life also, like what works for me might not be what works for somebody else.
Right. Yeah.
And I think recognizing that at an early age is helpful too, because all my friends didn't have any fears. And so you feel like, why me? Why is this happening? What did I do to deserve this? And the quicker you kind of get rid of those unhelpful thoughts and get back to, okay, how are we going to solve this? Let's get past this and have that like, let's figure it out mentality. I think the more successful you'll be in life.
Yeah, that's so true. And man, these are like all uniquenesses that stand out. Like for you, even it's just how honest you were. Like is like, hey, like it's not bearing the fear. It's not bearing the comparison of like, hey, my friends are at point B, C, D, and I'm still at point A. It's hey, I'm going to be honest with it. I'm going to look in the mirror. I'm going to say what's truthfully going on and then tell people so I can figure out these answers. Because obviously me doing it on my own is not working.
Yeah. And I also think like what I encourage our beam queen gymnasts is like, be rational, right? So if you have a bad turn, is your mental conversation like, I'm a horrible gymnast? No, it shouldn't be, at least. If you're jumping to like, if you have one bad turn on beam, are you now telling yourself I'm a bad beam worker and then I'm a bad gymnast? Because that's just silly, because you had one bad turn doesn't make you a bad person, but a lot of people tend to spiral and jump to all these conclusions where it's like, no, let's go back to the basics. What factually happened? You had a bad turn. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of like segues into literally like the most powerful piece for like any human being and just enjoying life is the idea like identity is the strongest force that like propels us forward, right? Like when we can identify with who we really want to be, if we can be honest with ourselves and we can answer that difficult question of like, who am I? And is this really who I want to be? I think it really pushes us forward because it starts to build that momentum. Like you just said, is like so many people create the identity, right? Like of one bad turn and then they identify, I am bad at beam, right? I hear it and hear people all the time. It's like, what are your grades like? And they're like, all A's and a C. I'm like, what's your C? And they're like, math. I'm just bad at math. I'm like, no. There's not a bad math gene. Like there's like, you weren't born bad at math. Yes, you may have to do something a little bit extra. You may have to reach out and ask for help. But how would you think that, like, how were you able to, or what does identity mean to you? How were you able to upgrade and grow your identity? And it sounds like you're doing a lot of that now with young gymnasts, young athletes as well. And so what's kind of that message in terms of identity that you preach to them?
I mean, that's a loaded question, right? In terms of identity. And I think it depends on what age group you're talking to.
Yeah.
And, I kind of give the example using myself. I went to the Olympics, but I don't lead with my identity of being an Olympian because it happened so many years ago. Is it a fun fact? Yes.
And I can claim that that's true because I asked her for bullet points on her resume and she was like, I'm an Olympic silver medalist. Like,
well, it is like on paper, one of the most impressive things. And it's something that I am so proud of and, living that day by day of how hard it was for me to get there. It is like that achievement personally is a big deal. But in terms of the title, like, it doesn't define who I am. It shows my work ethic and it shows my commitment and it shows all these other things. But at the end of the day, it's just a fun fact. It doesn't resonate like who I am. I'm not currently competing in the Olympics. And so it feels like a little off base if I was just like meeting someone, introducing myself like the Olympian, that just feels weird. So I think identity changes all the time, but I think that what it should be rooted in is more of your character versus your accomplishments. And I think that if people and athletes focus more on their character versus those, bullet points, I think they'll be a lot happier in life and feel more proud because they don't rest their whole identity or being on, I am this because I've accomplished this.
Yeah. And how have you like utilized that formula, so to speak, in terms of like implementing that in your own life, right? Because there's a lot of transitions that I'm assuming you went to from, obviously club gymnastics, college gymnastics, Olympic gymnastics, business career. Like there's many, you're having to answer that question multiple times, right? Like throughout periods of your life. And so how have you kind of implemented that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I went to the Olympics when I was 16. So I still had 2 more years left of high school before I even went to college. And so when I went to the Olympics, I was friends with people that were not, I went to a real high school. So I went to school with people that have been going to school with me since first grade. So they watched me progress. They didn't view me as this person. They just knew me as Sam, and they knew I practiced a lot. And obviously they were very proud of me, but it didn't change how they acted towards me.
Yeah.
But, I feel like I am perceptive enough to know, after you go to the Olympics, you can feel there's certain people in your life that now starting to warm up to you because of X, Y, and Z. And I was always so like sensitive to that when I got to college, I didn't even want anyone to know that I went to the Olympics because I wanted to make real, genuine friends who liked me as a person and my character and who I was. And then when they find out, it's like, oh, that's cool. That's a fun fact. I had no idea versus I want to be friends with this person because of X, Y, and Z. So I don't know. I feel like it kind of goes back to all of that. And then once you retire from sports, then it's like, okay, what is my identity? I'm not even an athlete anymore. What do I say when people ask what I do? And so I think, asking yourself that question of what do you want to be known as? And maybe that's, who you are and at your core, or maybe it's your hobbies, or maybe it's, your job or whatever it is. It can be a combination of things, but really not being so stuck in what was and being open to change, and that your identity can change and it's not a bad thing. It's just a fluid identity.
Well, I think a lot of people get stuck with that too, in terms of like change, because there's like this weird belief out there that like oftentimes change is bad, but really the reality is like everything changes. Like everything in your life is always, hopefully, is that's why people get stuck in ruts. They feel lack of inspiration, lack of motivation, because they're really not growing towards anything, because they're just like, this is who I am. This is always what I've done. And like, now I have nothing left. Another, I want to follow up too. You said one of the things when you were in college, because I truly believe in, over the last like decade, and like having conversations like predominantly with kids and young adults, is I've noticed that, I want to get your input on this, is the number one thing is they crave like meaningful relationships, like whatever that means, whether it be like a best friend, it could be boyfriend, girlfriend, it can be anything, but like they want something beyond surface level. And it's not their fault, right? Like a lot of times, because things have become so digitized, and like it's easier to text and it's easier to Snapchat and it's easier to send messages on Instagram. But really, we crave human connection at the end of the day, right? Like we want to be around and like actually sit down and have coffee with people. We want to have a meal with a person, right? And so like touch on that a little bit in terms of like how you went through that in college, and are like, do you see in the kids that you work with kind of the same concept?
I mean, when I was in college, Instagram was a thing, and Twitter and Facebook, but it wasn't at the level that it is now. So it's hard for me to even put myself in their shoes when,
Right.
especially NIL rules have just passed. That it's a
Sure.
job for a lot of these student athletes now to keep up with their social media. So I think a lot of people view it as that way, but I think I want to just go back to that that rational brain of how to teach yourself to have a rational brain. And, if you find yourself comparing on social media, or if you find yourself always feeling worse about yourself after you're on social media, like take note of that. Is that because of who you follow? Is that because of what they're posting? Like, you have the power to curate what content you look at. Now, if I start feeling bad about myself because I'm looking at something, I'm going to mute, I'm going to unfollow, I'm going to, stop looking at that, because half the time it's not reality anyway. Social media is a highlight reel. So
Yes.
I like curating things on my feed that inspire me, that uplift me. So whenever I look, it doesn't matter how many hours a day, hope to God it's not that many hours, but if I do spend a lot of time on social media, it's stuff that's fueling me, that's inspiring me to be better as a leader, to be better in business, to be a better role model. It's not making me feel bad that I'm not in the Philippines on a private yacht vacation with
Yeah.
all these, like Instagram Kim Kardashian girls, right? So I think also just giving people the power, that you have the power to curate what content goes in your brain, and that's going to generate the thoughts that you have. So take note of how you feel when you're ingesting all of this digital content.
And it's wildly crazy how much like we've touched on so far is like how little people are like in tune with their emotional side of like understanding themselves, but yet at the same time they know so much about Kim Kardashian, like, and what goes on in her life. It's like, more about like what happens in a celebrity's or a famous person or an actor or an actress's life than you do in your own life. Like that's like mind blowing. And so, yeah, like it's interesting to get people like in talking with people. It's like, dude, just take like 5-10 minutes, like, and think about like who you are. Think about what it is that you want. Think about the emotions that you feel on a day-to-day basis. And are those the emotions that like, is that okay with you? Do you want to feel frustrated or angry, or are you happy and joyful?
I mean,
Crazy.
and it's silly to think that we're telling, teenagers to do this when I am 30 and I still catch myself in that
Oh,
rabbit hole of like
yeah.
thoughts where I'm like, ugh, I wish I was doing that. I can't believe she's accomplished so much. I should have done this already. All these negative thoughts. And then you stop yourself and you're like, this is so silly. Like, the grass is always greener. If I want that, I could have it. You have to like change your thoughts into something that's more back to the rational side of things versus like this la la land of like
Right.
wishful thinking, right?
And it's never enough, right? Like, it's always, even if you got that, there would be more to it, right? Like, well, I want $1,000, then you get that, and it's like, yeah, but I really want $5,000, and then you get that, and you're like, yeah, but I really want 10,000. Like, you go down that rabbit hole, and you live in the state of lack so much. Is you're always, like you said, is like questioning yourself of like, have I done enough? Am I enough as a person? Have I accomplished enough? Does this person love me enough? It's definitely crazy. You said a powerful word, and I want to get like how you kind of define that in terms of a big piece of your identity is your character, and kind of how would you define that? I think of like, does that mean like the things that you value, the priorities you have in your life? Kind of what do you preach in terms of like in search of that character?
Yeah. I mean, for me, character is how you show up every day. So, what you do some of the time is what you do all of the time.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. And so I think athletes in general, their character is developed through sport. And I think that a lot of what defines me is not necessarily having been an athlete, but the character that was built as an athlete. And the first few things that come to my mind are, work ethic, you're being a hard worker, being a good role model, when you're in the gym, resilience, and really having a vision. So being able to be a goal setter. And those are things that I think have been consistent in my life, no matter if I am trying to pursue a career goal or as an athlete or in a relationship or things like that, or friendship. Those are like characters. I think if you were to ask any of my, 10 closest friends, they would probably have a mixture of those things to say, because I really feel like that's something that I defines me as a person.
Yeah. So what is it now? Like what is that mission that inspires you now? What is it that, obviously, you, in knowing you for 26 minutes now, is like very driven in terms of like what you wanted from like an athletic career, right? So what is it that, right? Because I firmly believe too that like motivation only lasts so long. Like we got to be pulled towards something. There has to be a mission that we're after. We have to be inspired to do something, even larger than ourselves, whether that's one person, 10 people, or a million people. It doesn't really matter. But I think that those are the things that pull us in the right direction. So what is that kind of mission and inspiration for you now?
Yeah, my parents growing up, they always told me that I could do anything I set my mind to. And I first told them, and I would tell the person that works at the grocery store or traveling that I was going to go to the Olympics one day. And so when I was 5 years old, I watched the Olympics and I just decided that was what I was going to do. And, you're 5, 6 years old, you have no idea what that means. You don't realize it's going to be hard. And so, I think my parents could have been like, oh, honey, good luck with that. Or,
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work, but like, they just kind of, I just remember hearing them say over and over and over again, like, you can do anything you set your mind to. If that's what you want to do, set your mind to it. And so that was the consistent message when I was a kid. And I think having that backbone philosophy when things did get tough, that was what my inner voice would go to, of like, I can do anything I set my mind to. And it's like, this is hard, but I can do anything I set my mind to. And so I think that was a big reason of why I felt like I was able to accomplish my goal as an athlete to go to the Olympic Games, even though I wasn't the best athlete. I wasn't the most flexible. I was very chatty. I wasn't very disciplined. Those things developed over time, of course, but I think the backbone of that constant belief in myself and that confidence that I could do anything I set my mind to was really the reason that I was able to make it as far as I did in my sport, and a big reason of why I'm so passionate to pass that message along to kids, whether they're a gymnast or whether they're in a different sport or whether they're a musician. I feel like even now as a business person, like it is hard to start your own business. It's hard to start a podcast. It's hard. Like being an adult is hard. And so, those days you just wake up and you're just like, man, I just don't know if I'm going to do it today. And hearing my own self give myself the pep talk of I can do anything I set my mind to is still the message that I think inspires me to put one foot in front of the other to continue towards my dreams.
Yeah. So fill us in a little bit more on like Beam Queen and like what you're doing with that and its overall mission, purpose. Give everybody a little bit of insight on that one.
Yeah, so Beam Queen Boot Camp is a traveling gymnastics clinic just for the balance beam. So typically in gymnastics, you have an event a camp for all 4 events, vault, bars, beam, and floor. But Beam Queen is unique because it's just for beam. It was the event that I had the biggest struggles on with fear and all of that. And then it ended up becoming my best event, my favorite event. So I put together a curriculum that I felt like helped me overcome a lot of obstacles on balance beam to pass on to the next generation. And what I realized is that balance beam is really synonymous to life. It's really tough. There's a lot of fear involved, but I think if you can develop confidence on balance beam, it's really what transfers over to all the other events and then life outside of gymnastics as well. So it's, imagine like a female empowerment conference disguised as a little kids boot camp.
Yeah.
We do confidence training. So we have a whole rotation on what does confidence look like? What does it feel like? How do you keep it? How do you get it? And just seeing this light bulb moment of young kids putting words to ambiguous topics such as confidence is really cool, because it's not just about sports. It's not just about gymnastics. It's really about developing strong leaders for the future. And so, we've traveled, to 25 states and international, and gearing up for hopefully our best summer yet. We have an online program, we have a boutique now. And so we really have this cult following of families that are inspired, I think, by our mission and want to help us continue passing on confidence to young girls all around the world.
I 100% agree with you. And it's something that I say to everybody too, is so many of these words like confidence, like leadership, like discipline, like they're used so often, energy, engagement. There's like all these words and like nobody knows what the hell they mean, or everybody has like all these different like definitions and how they define it and what it looks like. So how is it that, or I guess I should ask, like, kind of what is your definition, or how do you view in terms of confidence? Because you've mentioned the word a couple times. And yeah, like what is it that you try to, based off that, instill in them? Because I'm sure it's bigger than, I'm gathering that the mission is bigger than being good at gymnastics or being good on the beam, right? Like, and so how do you get that message across to them?
Yeah, I mean, what I've been seeing is, let's say a kid is really good at one skill, they have confidence with that one skill. And for some reason, even though they have confidence with this one skill, it's not inherent confidence. And so we're working on building inherent confidence with these young kids. And so my definition of confidence is confidence comes from hard work and positive self-talk. You can't have one without the other. You can't just work hard and tell yourself all these negative thoughts and expect to feel confident. And on the flip side, you can't be lazy and not put any work in and then tell yourself all these positive thoughts and imagine yourself feeling confident. So you really have to have both of those things. So I want to really give them the tools and the resources to gain confidence on those days where they just can't find it, that are tough. And I think even as adults, no one wakes up every single day like the most confident person. Right. But I think the people that appear the most confident have the tools and the resources to gain confidence in a split second. And for me, it's like when I'm not feeling confident, I think back of like, okay, why am I not feeling confident? Have I put the work in? It's like, yeah. And then it's like, okay, oh, it's because I'm telling myself all of these, scary negative thoughts. No wonder, like I need to remind myself of all the hard work I put in. And so I think when girls go to meets, this is a great way to practice gaining confidence, because they've done all the work in the gym, but if they're telling themselves, look how many people are watching me, the judge is going to give me a bad score, I always fall on beam, then you're not going to have a good experience because you're not finishing the second piece of that puzzle in order to gain confidence. And so really like giving them these scenarios about like, if you didn't study for a test in school, are you going to feel confident? No, you're not. You can tell yourself, I'm great and I'm smart and all these things, but you're probably not going to feel confident. And so I like giving them a lot of like real life analogies, because you see the aha moment and they're like, oh, wow, that really helps. And you're like, yeah, because no one's taught them how to find confidence if they don't have it. Usually, I think kids think, and maybe it comes from parents or adults, that people are just confident and some people aren't. Yes. And that's really not true at all. Yes. No one wakes up 100% confident all the time.
Well, and it's the same thing, right? Like with energy, people ask me all the time, it's like, man, why do you have so much energy all the time? It's like, at some point in my life, I chose not to live in low energy. And so I find things to do every single day to force me to like bring my energy up. Does it mean I get sad? Yeah. Does it mean I have low energy at times? Yeah. Like, but I just choose not to like let that linger for a day, 2 days, a week, like whatever the case may be. And so it sounds very similar. Um, One interesting point, because it sounds like, man, I'm just such a firm believer that within any of these, whether we're talking about confidence, whether we're talking identity, really even just overall sports in general, is like to get good at these things, it's usually simple things, and that's why nobody does them, right? And so it's like it's wildly interesting to me. Is like in mentorship and being around kids, I'm like, hey, here's like a simple tool you can use. I'm like, circle back a week later, I'm like, have you done anything with it? They're like, not really. Like, I need the next thing. I'm like, no. Like, the basics win. Like, keep things simple. Don't overthink them. In your experience, do you feel like people are kind of looking for like, really they're looking for more of a complex answer because they think that their situation is complex, so to speak? Or do they totally kind of quickly buy into the idea of like, hey, I can ask myself these two simple questions?
I would say it's not a blanket response, and I think it depends on which age group. I think the
Yeah.
younger kids are so willing to buy in and just like try it, and we do all these, experiments on nonverbal cues, how you can tell someone looks confident versus not when they're walking, for example, or looking someone in the eye and things like that. I think the older you get, the more, they're not willing to try, or maybe too cool for school. I would say I'm like biased. We have the best kids across the board, and most of them are so willing to buy in, or if they don't, they do a great job pretending. But I think I encourage all of them. And this is what I say. I'm like, you don't have to believe what I say. I hope you don't believe everything I say, and you choose to take this information and do your own experiment. Think negative thoughts and do a skill and see how it goes. And then think positive thoughts and do a skill. I'm like, I think the best way to learn something is on your own. And I just want to give you the information of what I learned so that you can do some self-discovery and some experiments to see what works for you. Because again, what works for one person might not work for someone else. And so I think taking that approach with young kids and empowering them to figure it out on their own, I think they're more willing to buy in, because I'm not just telling them, this is the right answer. This is how you should do things. This is gonna, it's like, listen, you could do this, you could do this, you can do this. Try it, see which one works the best and what works the best for you, and then keep doing it.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. Experience is the greatest educator, right? Like, you can't watch a YouTube video on how to ride a bike and then just run out there and go do it, right? Like, at some point you got to jump on the damn bike and fall a couple times and figure out how to get that balance.
Right.
All right, couple last questions is, and you can like break this up, because I know like a lot that you've mentioned and talked about is it kind of depends on the age, or you can just give a 30,000 foot view answer. But what's kind of the biggest piece of advice that you would give, whether that's young athletes, college athletes, gymnasts, even up to the higher level ones in terms of like Olympics? Like, what would be like your one big underlining here? I'm gonna pay you $100,000. Here's my answer.
Be clear on your goals. Be clear on your goals. And so for me, that was always to go to the Olympics. And so I think, when you have hard days, which you will, everyone does, whether it's in sport or school or life, having that fallback. Like, I just remember, having those bad days as an athlete. You're like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And for me, the answer was always going to the Olympic Games. I want to go to the Olympics Games. And it's like, oh, well, I guess if I quit, I don't really have a shot at that anymore. So I can either deal with this hard day and have a shot at the Olympics, or quit. And, that's not my goal anymore. And that's okay too, if that's what you want. But I think kind of, giving yourself perspective on what your goals are reminds you in those hard moments why you're doing what you're doing. And so for me, having that fallback of that very, very long-term big goal for so many years was powerful. And then also having goals every single day. So those short-term goals of, I want to do one extra of this, or I want to spend 10 extra minutes on this, something that's like achievable that I could do every single day. That if it's the worst practice on the face of the planet, at least I did this one thing right. And
Yeah.
that could just be like an attitude. And so I would do this thing when I was training for the Olympics. My coach and I would do it together of like one thing he wanted me to improve the next day and one thing he was proud of me for. And so I kind of got in the habit of doing this with myself too. When I got to college of like, okay, tomorrow I want to make my first turn. I've been missing the first turn a lot. I want to make the first turn tomorrow. But you know what? I'm really proud of myself because I've been having a bad attitude. And today I just decided to switch my attitude and I'm proud of my attitude. So it could be as small as your attitude, or, I gave someone a compliment when I was having a bad day, or, the proud moment can be so small, but as long as you're recognizing something you're proud of yourself for, when you walk out the door, you're going to come back in the gym or go back on the field or on the court with a more positive, optimistic mind for the next day.
So what's the next big thing you want to accomplish?
I feel like, I'm on the path to doing it, like the community that I'm growing with Beam Queen is more fulfilling than I ever could have thought is possible. And I think we are really on the forefront of revolutionizing confidence and putting data points to young kids on how to build inherent confidence. Because, with Lean In and the Lean In movement and women in business, it's like, okay, we know women in the workplace have a lot of issues because of this, and this, and here's where they came from. But no one's really doing the data right now on how to change that, or how can we, what can we instill in our youth so they don't end up like this, and this.
Right.
And that's really where I feel like I can have an impact with these young kids. First of all, I think sports already gives kids a lot of confidence and a lot of those characteristics that men in the workplace typically have. But there's all these statistics on at what age girls quit sports. Do they go to college? Are they professional athletes? There's all these things. But what if we, had a class in school, or, at a younger age in sports, we were able to teach these life skills like confidence and, hard work and resilience, whether they go on to be a D1 athlete or an Olympian or just, a casual athlete, they still have already built a foundation around inherent confidence. So that's really my mission now, is to figure out, what we can do at that age so that when they go through puberty or those insecure moments, or when they're applying for a job, they know how to pick themselves up and carry themselves and not let one bad day or one bad interview or one bad test define them as a bad person, but just as had a bad day. So.
Or even actually applying for the job is a lot of times,
right.
Especially women are so hard on themselves, is they won't even throw in an application assuming that they're not good enough for whatever spot. Yeah, no, I 100% with you. Yeah. Okay, rapid fire, last 3 questions, and tell everybody where they can find you. Favorite food?
Sushi.
Favorite restaurant?
Sugarfish.
Dream vacation?
Cabo.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm super grateful that you jumped on and shared all I call them like golden nuggets, right? Like the whole concept is it's kind of like when I think of reading is not be able to like apply the entire book into your life. It's like, what is that one thing that I can take away and like at least try out or implement and just see if it works for me. But I think a big piece is, I fully stand behind like your mission. I'm super inspired by like what you do. I think it's super cool. I think that there's definitely a huge need for it. And I think people are craving, and I think people actually want it. They just haven't had the ability to raise their hand and speak up and ask for that yet. So that's super cool. Just tell everybody where they can find you, right? Like they want to learn more about like what you're doing, your mission, and how you're inspired. Just share everybody with where they can locate you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on social media at Samantha Peszek. And then also Beam Queen Bootcamp is our community, and it's at Beam Queen Bootcamp. And we are on Instagram. Our TikTok is at the Beam Queen Bootcamp, and it's inspirational content. We also have a Spotify that we just launched that's clean and appropriate. All of our playlists are like, practice mode or, bubble baths and relaxing. So no matter what stage of an athlete you're in, we have a playlist for you. So we're really excited about that. We have a Pinterest, a YouTube channel, and also a Facebook page. So we are very accessible wherever you want to find our content.
Boom. Well, hopefully all you guys, I encourage everybody to reach out, learn more, see what's going on. And everything she said today is so freaking powerful. And hopefully that you guys will, do your own research, do your own homework, and find things that can help you upgrade, not even your own life, but ultimately your identity and continue to grow as a person. So as always, appreciate it for you guys listening. Can't wait to chat with you guys soon.